Hello. Is this 4 o'clock?
Yes, I'm Stefan.
Yes, Stefan.
Nice to meet you.
The Fortress tour.
Yes.
Yes. Yesterday I was with Nancy's tour.
Yeah, you were 10:30 with her, right?
Yes, and I made a video. It's on YouTube now.
Okay, nice.
Okay, it's okay for you too to make a video today?
Of course, yeah.
Yes, I will.
In case you didn't catch my name, I'm Stefan, so you're going to be stuck with me for the next 2.5 hours, 2 hours 40 minutes. Republic Square is the main square here in Belgrade, and the things we're going to cover are usually just around the square. So we are practically going to make a half circle around the place. We are going to go to Bohemian Quarter, then all the way through Dorchol, all historical part of the Belgrade, to Kalemegdan Park. We are going to enter Belgrade Fortress and exit on the other side, in this side, and we'll have one more stop on the way back here. So we are going to end like few hundred meters away from this place, maybe a few minutes away. So in Serbia, in order to be a tour guide, you need to have a license. That means you need to pass 8 additional exams, and you need to pass psychological evaluation. Something we tell people on almost all of our tours that's important to understand the tours and the history a little bit better is that Serbia, in the end of the 14th century, started gradually falling under the Ottoman Empire. We remained occupied almost 500 years, almost 5 centuries, and then in the beginning of the 19th century we had 2 Serbian uprisings. The first Serbian uprising lasted 9 years. It was really militarily strong. It was also backed by Russia, but eventually that uprising failed. All important people escaped across Sava and Danube rivers to Austro-Hungary. The only one who stayed here was father of the guy on the horse. This guy on the horse over there is called Knez Mihailo, Prince Michael. Maybe you heard his name, given that that main pedestrian zone over there is named after Prince Michael. Now his father started second Serbian uprising 2 years after the first one failed. That one was not militarily strong, but Miloš, his father, was a great diplomat. He managed to gain autonomy for Serbia, and his son, Prince Michael, managed almost to finish what his father started. He used one incident between Serbian boy and Ottoman soldier, and after a long diplomatic battle, he expelled Ottomans from 6 Serbian cities. On each side of the monument, you'll see 3 plates with the names of the cities from which they were expelled. Even though that happened, that doesn't mean that Serbia became independent. It took Serbia another 10 years to declare official independence, and still that was just a small central part around Belgrade. So historical southern Serbian territories were still to be liberated, which is why Prince Michael is pointing symbolically with his finger towards south, towards those territories, like saying, hey guys, let's go liberate rest of our southern country historical territories. National Theatre over there is the last thing we're going to speak on the Republic Square before we move on to Bohemian Quarter. National Theatre was founded by Prince Michael in 1868, finished 1 year later. When that happened, Belgrade was quite a small place. It had maybe 25,000 people, 4,000 or 5,000 houses. Yet the big hall in the National Theatre could fit around 1,000 people. So proportionally, very huge theatre for such a small place. The second year written on the facade, 1922, was the year of reconstruction, because National Theatre was destroyed in the bombings of the First World War. Just one of the numerous bombings that Belgrade suffered throughout its history. We are going to speak about that a little bit more in Dorchol area. Now, the last bombings that Belgrade suffered were bombings by NATO in 1999 that lasted for 78 days. That's National Museum behind us. I'll let you guess once again. What could the Czech guy open? Brewery? Yeah. So brewery. There is a chimney over there. If you take a few steps back, you'll see it. So those guys who had their shops of handmade items here now wanted to offer their customers also a bit of alcohol, that beer. It didn't take them long until they realized that alcohol is far more profitable than the items they were selling. So slowly, from selling handmade items such as hat, they transformed into places in which they sell mainly alcohol and food. Now, let's get back to the street, to the development of the street. The second important part of the development of the street was when Prince Michael
Thank you. I only need one drop. Just
yeah, don't worry. I told you it's homemade, so it better fits in this small bottle. But usually when you buy that homemade rakia, it will come in a plain plastic bottle from Coca-Cola, water, or something like that. So given that rakia is usually transparent, this one is yellow because this one is honey. Usually it will be transparent, and having that transparent liquid in a bottle of water can be quite confusing sometimes. I don't know a single child in Serbia that at one point of their lives didn't mistake rakia for water and be like glug 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 to rakia, and then you get it big time.
just the one drop.
Here you go.
Okay.
Okay. So how you say cheers in Serbian? You say živeli. You have a toast by saying živeli, which means to live. You can also say nazdravlje or uzdravlje, which is kind of the same and means to help. So živeli or nazdravlje is the same, whatever you want. How you drink rakia, that depends on you. You can shot it, you can sip it. Traditionally we were sipping rakia. Recently people started to shot it as they serve it in those small shots. Živeli. The man says that you should feel effect after the third one.
It's actually very sweet. What's the name of this?
That's Đuro Jakšić, famous Serbian painter and poet.
Okay.
So this place in which we are now is called Dorçol, after two Turkish words, Dort and Yol. Dort means four and Yol road. So four roads. This place is not named four roads because of these modern day intersections. In the Ottoman period, this was a typical Ottoman settlement. A lot of those curvy streets with short houses, narrow curvy streets, short houses and long big walls so that you don't see what's going on inside the yard. Also, all the streets were covered with that cobblestone like we saw in Bohemian Quarter. In the 19th century, our princes, our leaders wanted to get rid of that Ottoman influence after such a long period of time, so they wanted to make this place look more like Western European cities. Their whole politics and everything was making a turn from east towards west, opening to Europe. So they reconstructed the place, which is why we have so many streets nowadays cutting each other on the right angle, which is quite common and typical for the Western cities. Now, given that I told you this is like the oldest part of the city, and if you just look around, that wouldn't seem that way. That doesn't seem that way. It doesn't seem that the city is that old. That's because architecture is not preserved. With the majority of the city, architecture is not preserved. There is actually quite diversity of the styles in the city. It's very common to see many different styles one to another. And why is that? It's because of history and the way we had it before. Nowadays, when we look at the situation in the country, things are getting better. Still far from good, but getting better. Every single week, we have more and more tourists. But the history of this city, as well as the whole country, was quite tough. Okay, so this building behind me is the oldest residential building preserved in the whole city. It comes from the first half of the 18th century and is built in typical Ottoman style. We like to call it Balkan style, which is like a kind of misleading, so if anything it's Ottoman style. It's also unique, it was unique even back then, because it was an exception. When Ottomans built residential houses, they were usually only one-floor buildings. This one has a second floor, which made it unique, I guess because it was made for a prominent Ottoman family. Nowadays, this is the museum of Dositej Obradović and Vuk Karadžić, two very important people for Serbian language. Dositej Obradović formed a first higher educational institution over here during the first Serbian uprising. His student, Vuk Karadžić, he reformed Serbian language, and he's the reason why we speak the way we speak, why we write the way we write, and he introduced a very simple rule to a language, which is why we nowadays wonder, why do you guys make your life so complicated with all those spellings? So the rule says, read as it's written, write as you speak. So we have a phonetic alphabet, we have 30 sounds, 30 letters. It's quite straightforward to learn how to read and write in Serbian, but everything else is kind of difficult. So if you want to learn Serbian, first part will be extremely easy, but everything else will be a bit hard. Even during communist Yugoslavia, the official language was called Serbo-Croatian, although people like to call it Yugoslavian language. And you know, communists, everywhere they used to destroy national identities in order to create what they wanted to create according to their ideology. Here they wanted to create Yugoslavian national identity. So after the breakup of the country in the 90s, that of course led to nationalism. All of those people, all of those republics wanted to recreate their national identities, and we ended up with terrible nationalism. So you couldn't imagine anymore anyone of them speaking Serbo-Croatian language. We had to have a language of our own, because, I mean, God forbid we speak that common language, we're so different, we need to have our language. So we ended up having Serbian language, Bosnian language, Croatian language, Montenegrin language, so 4 languages, the biggest difference between them being the language itself. So the difference is in dialects and in accents. I'll change a word milk in all these dialects, in all these languages, for you to see the difference between them. So in Serbian, for milk you say mleko, Croatian, mlijeko, Bosnian, mlijeko, Montenegrin, mlijeko. As you can see, almost identical. What's funny is when governments communicate, so they send letters to each other and they have to translate it, even though they can understand every single word of that letter. So that on the other hand gives us an edge, you know, when we apply for a work abroad, so you're a boss in your company and you have someone from former Yugoslavian republics who wants to get a job in your company, and they'll be like, listen boss, look, my CV is the best, look, I speak Serbian, Croatian, Bosnian, Montenegrin and English. Oh my god, this guy is so intelligent, he's such a polyglot, speaks 5 languages, actually speaks only 2 of them, Serbo-Croatian and in this case English. So what I want to say is that we have one language as real language, and we have 4 political languages. They were just created because of the political things, not because language evolved so much. So Yugoslavia was made out of 6 republics. What's with Macedonia and Slovenia? They, on the other hand, had a different language. Their language is a bit different from ours. They all knew Serbo-Croatian language, but even if they didn't, we still can understand each other just using our native languages because they're quite similar. Now, is there anything you would like me to teach you in any of these 4 languages?
Before that, I have a question.
Of course.
Albania different?
Very different.
So our tour is more like a cultural tour.
What do you think?
Yeah, it's more like a history and culture.
Well, we try to cover as many different topics as we can.
Is this you emphasize in this tour for culture and history?
We try to approach you, Serbia and Belgrade, as much as we can by covering very different topics from culture, tradition, food, nightlife, everything we can to fit in these 2.5, almost 3 hours.
Okay.
So we are now in front of Bayrakli Mosque, one of the 273 mosques and masjids that were once in Belgrade. Out of those almost 300, only one is left. So this one, Bayrakli Mosque. Bayrak in Arabic means flag, so the literal translation of the name of this mosque would be Flag Mosque. You can imagine this place in as a typical Ottoman settlement, with a lot of those short houses, and there's a hill going down. So this mosque is practically on top of a hill. You could have seen this mosque from all over the city, the town at the time, and this was the main mosque which had a very big flag on top of minaret. So that flag was very easily seen from all over the place, which is why people started simply calling it Flag Mosque. This is also the oldest religious object in Belgrade. We have bigger ones, we have newer ones. We don't have older religious object than this. It comes from the end of the 16th century. Now, if you know the fact that Belgrade's history started in the 3rd century BC, that might strike you as odd, that the city is so old, and yet the oldest religious object comes from the end of the 16th century. So you would wonder, why is that? Well, the same reason behind the architecture of the city stands behind those disappearings of the religious objects. Given the huge number of wars, destructions, bombings, and a lot of different cultures and kingdoms, countries clashing over here, religious objects were the first ones to go. So religion was propelling usually throughout the history majority of the wars. So it seems normal that religious objects were also the first ones to go. Now, in the 18th century, in the 3 different occasions, Austrians got a hold of the city, and in that period, for example, they turned some of the mosques into Catholic churches by, for example, destroying the minarets and using the main building as a Catholic church, which is why the stones of the minaret and the building itself are different, because minaret was re-added later again. On the other hand, the Ottomans did the same thing with Orthodox and Catholic churches when they arrived. Now, you would then wonder, okay, so why did you then have so many wars, so many battles, bombings and so on? Why was your history so violent? And we can turn to geography for an answer. And geography would tell us that Belgrade has the 2nd best geographical position in Europe, after which place? I told you, after Istanbul, Belgrade has the 2nd best geographical position in Europe. Belgrade is the only European capital that lies on a confluence of 2 big rivers, Sava and Danube. Now, those 2 rivers also make a border between 2 geographical regions. In the north, we have Pannonian Plain. Until 600,000 years ago, there was a Pannonian Sea. Nowadays, just a very fertile flatland, completely flat. On this side of the rivers, you have hilly Balkans. Now, strategically wise, should you rule hilly Balkans, you would also have advantage over that Pannonian Plain. Now, Belgrade is also on an equal distance between Eastern civilization and Western civilization. Many trade routes, many roads were passing through Belgrade. And should you want to control the trading, should you want to conquer some place on whether East or West, you would then, I guess, suppose to, you should really win Belgrade, because it would be strategically very important. Before we move on to Kalemegdan Park and Belgrade Fortress, what I would like to tell you is about a street a few streets down that is called Stratinića Bana. Now, in the 90s, that street was famous by the name of Silicon Valley, but not because of the IT companies, as you might have guessed, actually because of the plastic surgeries. So, in the beginning of the 90s, we had a very tough economical situation in the country. We had a civil war. Serbia and Montenegro were under sanctions. They couldn't import nor export anything. Economy collapsed. People didn't have basic supplies such as bread, milk and stuff like that. They had to wait in lines for that. They couldn't even buy that. So, despite that terrible situation, yeah, on top of that we had hyperinflation, which was at a time world's worst hyperinflation in history. Later we were beaten by Zimbabwe and Argentina. Now, despite all that, we still had a lot of people who were vastly rich that didn't feel any crisis at all. So those guys used to come to that street, which became the main party zone, and they would come with their fancy cars, park in front. They would go into a cafe, sit down, put their car keys on top of a table so that everyone can see how fancy car they got. On the other hand, you had those ladies who wanted some financial stability and knew no other way to attract the attention of those shallow rich guys other than inflating themselves. So what became a common scene is to see those very rich guys with those very fake girls over there, which annoyed ordinary people, ordinary locals, who started calling it Silicon Valley. Now, of course, because of its bad reputation, people stopped going there, and that place died out as a party zone. So now we just passed the first gate of the Belgrade fortress, and now we're gonna put almost 2,500 years of history in like 10-15 minutes. So I'm just gonna take the highlights. I'm not gonna smother with history, I'm just gonna take out the highlights to tell you something about Belgrade. Before that, do you see those 3 rows of stones over there? What is Belgrade called like in Serbian, and what does it mean?
White.
It's called Beograd. Belgrade in English means absolutely nothing. Belgrade in English means absolutely nothing. Beograd means Beo or Beli means white. Grad means city. So Beograd means white city. Now, I'll tell you how this was named, but you'll have to follow the story from the beginning. Now, the history of Belgrade started in the 3rd century BC, when a Celtic tribe named Skordisci arrived to the place and founded a round wooden settlement over here. Then in the 1st century AD, they called it Singidon. In the 1st century AD, Romans arrived to the place, conquering the whole area and rebuilding this round wooden settlement in a stone fortress. Now, they picked a white limestone from Tashmaiden Park and they rebuilt that fortress with that white limestone. You have Danube over there. Danube was a northern border. You maybe don't see it from this angle, you'll see it better from inside the fortress. Danube was the northern border of the Roman Empire. They were strengthening their northern border as they were defending themselves from the barbaric tribes, how they call them, mainly the Huns. So they built many fortresses along the Danube riverside. When in 6th and 7th century Slavic tribes started coming to this place, to the Balkans, they came from north, from the riverside, and the first thing they saw was this white fortress. Now, given that Slavic people used to name things by describing them, they naturally started shouting, "Ah, Belgrade, Belgrade, white city, white city." So naturally it stayed white city. Belgrade was capital of 10 different countries. It was capital of Principality of Serbia, Kingdom of Serbia, Kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovenes, Kingdom of Yugoslavia, Federative Democratic Yugoslavia, Federative People's Republic of Yugoslavia, Socialist Federative Republic of Yugoslavia, Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, Serbia and Montenegro, and finally in 2006, Republic of Serbia. So that's, I guess, another way of traveling, given that I was born in 1993 and I lived in 3 different countries without ever moving from my hometown. Of course, my parents, grandparents lived in many more different countries. Now let's go from here until someone else wants to speak with me for quite stupid reasons. I just remembered what I forgot to tell you when that guy interrupted me. So I actually wanted to explain you those walls because we passed 3 different gates. The first one that we passed, everything that is in red bricks on the fortress was built by Austro-Hungarians in those 3 different periods. The second gate that we passed, the one we stood in front of, was Ottoman Gate. When they won the fortress in 1521, they expanded the fortress a little bit. That gate was called Zindan Gate. Zindan means dungeon, so that gate was practically used as a prison during the Ottoman reign. The third gate that we passed, the last one, was built by that Serbian leader in 15th century, so medieval Serbian gate. Now, just to expand on what I forgot to tell you. Now, back to the story. So we came to the confluence of Sava and Danube rivers. Now,